My name is Ibin Njaggah. I work at Kenya Power, National Control Center under dispatch. So if at any point you see me a day ahead, that is the format I'm used to moving in. Nirudisheni the current day, right? Yeah, because for me to be here tomorrow is already planned in terms of energy. So if you see me skipping a day ahead or a couple of hours ahead, please just ground me. That's okay. All right. So we are about to begin our panel 4 forum. And here we are talking about farming power and the future of thermal investments. Therefore, all protocols observed. Good afternoon. Welcome back. And this conversation is actually coming at a very critical time for Kenya and Africa in broad, where our energy landscape is morphing, even as we strive to balance energy security and sustainability. And therefore, where we stand, our current generation mix has about 80+% of renewables, which would mean hydro, wind, solar, and geothermal. So at this point, we're really having a panel to just discuss and get to know where does farming power come in, the dependable capacity that supports the grid when the renewable output fluctuates. And ideally, even as I speak from the place of having handled our grid at the desk and even from the dispatch end, we have heavily relied on thermal to assist on that. And therefore, we also need to know what is the future of these thermal investments in a renewable-driven energy system. And therefore, today, our panel brings together experts from across the energy value chain, policymakers, investors, utilities, and technologists to help us explore how we can balance reliability, affordability, and sustainability, what policy and investment frameworks are needed to manage this transition, and how emerging technologies can transform traditional thermal plants into cleaner, more flexible assets. It will challenge us to think beyond the traditional boundaries of thermal versus renewable, and instead envision a cooperative and complementary energy system that supports Kenya's vision in line with also the national energy policy. And with that, I would like to invite our esteemed panelists.
Good afternoon all. My name is Norman Wanyiri from Gulf Power. Gulf Power is one of the thermal power plants with an installed capacity of about 80 megawatts. And we are located in the river. We started the operations in 2014 after a bidding process that started in 2009. So we have a 20 megawatts, 20 years PPA with KPLC.
Good afternoon to all. My name is Siva Shankar. I'm from Triump Power. We are also in the same, like Gulf Power. We have also started the operations in 2015. And we are a heavy fuel oil based power plant. And we have a PPA with KPLC for 20 years, and which we have consumed almost 10 years now. And we look forward to continuing further. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Mungai Kihara. I work at Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority in Electricity and Renewable Energy Directorate. It's very interesting again to be here because on my left, I have 2 gentlemen who work in thermal power plants, and I'm trying to work and promote renewable energy where I sit. So gentlemen, so don't beat me very much. Kiboko kidogo too. But definitely we are here to see how we can work together. Thank you.
Yes, please, sir.
Good afternoon and thank you. My name is Bryan Micheni. I am Senior Shift Controller at the National Control Center for KPLC. I am one of the primary users of the plants that have been mentioned here, as well as all the plants that are currently connected to the Kenyan power system. And I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Karibuni sana. For those who are not yet in, we are beginning our panel on firming power and the future of thermal investments. And therefore, our first question goes to you, sir, CEO Gulf Power. Given Kenya's evolving generation mix, how should the IPPs reposition their plants to stay relevant through flexibility upgrades, hybridization, or fuel switching? And what investment signals are needed to justify these transitions?
Okay, thank you. Now, thermal power plants have been justifying their presence for the last 25 years. I remember in 2002, there was a concerted effort to shut them down. And it's the same story we hear from the current parliament when they discuss thermal power plants. So it's not a new thing. Actually, our major concern has been every time we try to do that, to go to that direction, we end up procuring more thermals. And the reason is, for example, the moratorium that we have had for the last 7 years, where we have delayed development of new generation capacity. So what happens? What happens is that when you get this kind of delay and you get into our power, generation crisis, what people think about is a short-term measure. So you either go for emergency or you go for HFO power plants. That has been the story all along. And every time we, let's say, try to, evaluate their position, we find that it becomes a little bit difficult to eliminate them or maybe to shut them. However, things have changed. Kenya has committed to 100% green energy by 2030. Assuming that that is the direction you have to take, there are a number of things that thermals can do to remain relevant. And some of them is that there are ways of adopting cleaner ways of generating. And some of them are, for example, conversion, whereby the current generators can be converted from using HFO to using LNG. And the environmental impact from LNG as a fuel is much better than what you'd get from HFO. And that is one of the things. Another way is integrating with the renewable sources of energy. And even in a smaller scale, it's actually good for people here to know that most of the thermals at the moment have integrated solar into their power plants. For now, it is for local generation, but given opportunity, this can even be to a larger scale, so that we can also try to cut down on the carbon emissions and all that. So this is a direction we can take. And of course, there are technologies now that have been developed that makes them more efficient going forward. And this comes especially when you talk about turbines, and also in addition to getting other types of fuels like hydrogen and ammonia. So all these technologies can be adopted, and they could resort to thermals being more relevant going future. It is important to note that according to the PPAs that we have, the last thermal is supposed to be decommissioned in 2035, meaning that we have about 10 years. And if we really want to go green, then there is a lot of work that we have to do to invest in other greener technologies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Please, I hope as we continue, if you have any questions, you're writing them down. We'll have a time at the end for questions and answers. I want to throw this at Bryan Micheni. From a systems operations perspective, what farm capacity margin and flexibility profile does Kenya realistically need to maintain their N-1 security as renewable penetration grows?
Okay. Thank you for the question. And when we're considering N-1, basically the definition of N-1 is how will your system run in case you don't have your single biggest unit. And there's been an entire bone of contention with energy planning as to whether we should base that off the biggest farm capacity unit, which in this case is Kiambere, or if we should base it off the single biggest grid connected unit, which is technically Lake Turkana at 300. Now, that would be the reserve margin. But now there is also the functional reserve margin when we're looking at our work. And when you consider a single day, the variation between our base load and our peak is 100%, over 100% at times. So our base load might be around 1100 megawatts, and our peak is currently at around 2400 megawatts. So you're actually doing half as base load. Now, when you're looking at that flexibility side, there's two things that come in. There's the supply side flexibility, or the supply side reserve margin, which is now what do we need in terms of generation to cater for the loss of the single biggest unit, as well as market-based and demand-side incentives, which is how can we start working towards demand sensitivity to cost, such as time of use tariffs. How do we start shaving our peak, increasing the energy that's consumed during the low demand periods? And a lot of that has been spoken about earlier. And also the next session, I think, is about the enforcement of time of use tariffs. So I'll leave that floating for now. But as for now, if you're looking at the generation side, it is the loss of the single biggest unit, which is approximately 300 megawatts. That will keep on evolving. As we spoke about nuclear in the morning, if a nuclear plant is 1000 megawatts, then the system needs to be able to handle for 1000 megawatts of absence.
Thank you so much, Bryan. Allow me to move to Siva Shankar, CEO Triump Power, along with the same conversation that was kicked to Bryan. What minimum firm capacity margin does Kenya need to maintain credible N-1 security, and how should the thermal capacity be valued in a grid increasingly shaped by variable renewable energy? Let me go through that again. Bryan has already just first bit, and therefore the second bit is what I'm kicking to you. How should thermal capacity be valued in a grid increasingly shaped by variable renewable generation?
Thank you for this question. Actually, as Bryan has said, just to touch on the subject, I want to say that worldwide it is accepted that it is about 15% of is a good amount of having the minimum capacity reserve. So how we can integrate the thermals going forward is a tricky question. But now, as you can see, that all over the world, the most of the power consumed, roughly about 80% of the power consumed is coming from thermals. Probably we are looking thermals as a forgotten case, or it is going to be removed from the energy mix, which I don't doubt very much, because in the energy transition you need to have a constant supply while you are transiting to the other technologies. So even if we talk about the renewables and solar, wind, and everything, while you are adopting that technology, you still need power to continue your operations. So in that case, probably, these thermals have to stay for some time before you say that, okay, they are outdated. But if you can see Asia Pacific region, you can see China is building huge coal power plants, and India is also building power plants, coal power plants. And the technology and the advancement in the thermals also, like ultra super critical boilers, they have been designed, and then now the low emissions and more, the consumption of the fuel is going to be reduced. And as in the morning, some other speaker has said that, why can't we use the coal ash in making the cement? It is already being done elsewhere, where they call it as pozzolana cement. They mix a certain percentage of coal ash to the cement, and then it is at a subsidized price. Okay, the quality is not like Portland, but still it can do the work, and it can be much more beneficial of use of coal ash. So that way, maybe thermals can still survive for a longer time. And coal is also abundantly available all over the world. Okay, here the morning session has said that the coal found here may not be really having a good calorific value, but that needs to be checked and then adapted as it is possible. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. That was quite insightful, to say the least. And I'll move to Engineer Kihara. How should EPRA redefine system adequacy and farm capacity requirements in a future where Kenya's grid may be dominated by wind, solar, and storage?
Thank you very much, Ibin. Looking at, starting the last part of the question, looking at the future, and Norman has mentioned this, the government has proclaimed that they really want to have a clean power system, which will be dominated more of renewable energy. The reason I'm saying dominated is because we also expect thermal power plants to play a key role. And when I say thermal power plants, is that, and Norman has mentioned this, there's a need to reorganize ourselves to see which are these better technologies. And one technology, and this is some work that Bryan has done with his team in East Coast, is also to include East Coast power development, in the East Coast power development plan, that you have LNG. And I know some power plants, current power plants, are also imagining how in the future, how do we fit in this future coming in. So with that, it seems the whole power sector will continue, I'm using your word, more faith, change from where we are today to the future. When my boss was working in Kenya Power some time back, we had a system that is dominated by hydro and thermal. Now we are having a system that most likely we have wind and solar coming in. It may not really dominate, but they are really playing a big role into it. So even as a EPRA need also to, at that pace, also try to change our way of thinking. And one way of doing this is look at our grid code and see how is it also adapting to the changes that are happening in the power system. How do we make the grid code that it is assisting us and assisting system operators in integrating more of renewable energy, because that will come. How do we bring things like battery storage, and how we operate our power system? How do we bring pump storage? Because those are things that will come in future. There was a study that done by Kenya last time, and it showed that Lake Turkana, which is quite far away, can be a very good source of pump storage. Having a reservoir downstream of Turkana and pumping back to Turkana again and have that cycle. So these are things that we really need to integrate in our grid code as things keep changing. In addition to that, our planning also need also to be adaptable to these processes. Our electricity plan now, as I said, is dominated by hydros and thermal. But now we are really having more of small VREs, and VRE, as we know, they cannot really Bryan keep telling me they cannot run a system just with variable renewable energy. So how do we now bring others? So this is where the planning comes in, because we need the other power plants that really support this. The big hydros, like high grad force that is being done, maybe integrating with the East Africa power pool. We are aware that, for example, Denmark are able to do a lot of wind power because they are connected to Norway, who have a lot of hydro. So East Africa power pool is also another source of no balancing of our system. But all that also needs us to grow our system. There's always some weak links. I was asking, I don't think it's Bryan, someone that Uganda has done 𝐾𝐢𝐵 power project, and Uganda cannot really consume all the power they're able to generate using 𝐾𝐽𝐵 and other plants. How can Kenya benefit from this? I'm not very good at that, but someone told me, even if we make a part good, where 𝐾𝐽𝐵 is, and connect it to Kenya, Uganda also need to upgrade their infrastructure. So there's quite a lot, and as a EPRA, as a regulator, we also need to be up to date and make sure our regulatory framework actually supports integration of renewable energy. Because as the government has proclaimed, then we have to support the government. Thank you, Ibin.
Thank you so much, Kihara. When Power Norman was speaking and answering his question, he mentioned the conversion to LNG and LPG, if I'm correct. Yeah. And to follow up on that question, from an IPP standpoint, what cost recovery model, capacity markets, availability payments, ancillary service remuneration would provide the predictability needed to invest in modern farming assets?
Thank you. Now, it's good to mention that all the thermal power plants that we have in Kenya participated in a detailed feasibility study that was coordinated by KenGen. It was purely on conversion from HFO to LNG. And each individual power plant knows what is required for that conversion. And this is information that has been shared I believe, with the regulator. This is also information that has been shared with the Ministry of Energy. So the sector knows. I'm not sure about Kenya Power, whether they are aware about this, but this is a study that we did. Now, there are benefits. And one of the benefits is cutting the cost of power, because it is factual that HFO power plants are expensive. They are more expensive because of the fuel component. The tariff has two major components. The energy component, which is about 2.5 to 3.5 US cents. But there is a bigger component, almost over 15 cents, which is the HFO component. And that makes them more expensive. Now, on the other hand, there is the environmental aspect, especially when it comes to carbon dioxide emissions, sulfur dioxides, nitrogen dioxides, and particulate matter. So there has to be a compromise between what we want to achieve. Because to achieve low cost of electricity from thermals, because LNG is much cheaper than HFO. So to achieve that conversion, we have to spend we have to have a capital injection for conversion. For example, in our case, we anticipated, or the estimated cost of conversion was about 40 million euro to convert. So the question would be, how do we recover that investment? And this is a discussion that is going on, because either it goes to the capacity payment, meaning that you add a premium to the capacity payments, which we know are already considered quite high, or we have a mechanism where we can recover from the savings that we get from fuel. So those are the considerations that we have. But the benefits are clear. So it is the sector, maybe through EPRA, that has to guide on what do we want to achieve. Do we want to spend that investment, mitigate environmental impacts, or do we maintain the status quo until they are decommissioned? And the risk is that going by what I've just said earlier on and what has been happening, and the delayed, additional generation, there is a very high probability that their terms will be extended beyond 2035. So it is something that is work in progress. So those are the various options that we have going forward. Already the current structure is already sort of cast in stone. So we would have to look at, if we were to do conversion, how do we structure the cost recovery mechanism? Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've posed a challenge and yet had us consider alternatives, but capacity payments is what you're saying would be what you'd rely on heavily to do that recovery. Engineer Kihara, I'll get back to you on that. I see your remark on it. But we'll proceed with me asking the CEO Triump, Siva Shankar. As more intermittent power comes online, what ramping, fast start, and inertia capabilities should future thermal plants be required to deliver, and how should these capabilities be compensated?
This is a very tricky question in the first place, because ramping up, when we are talking about the Kenyan scenario, we have mainly the thermal is the engine plants, diesel engine plants. So the ramping up of engine plants are much, much better than the real coal-fired thermal plant, where you take a lot of time to start the plant itself. The flexibility with the diesel engine plant is that you can start the engine in a few minutes and start generating the power and start discharging, evacuating through the grid. That means we are very much. So we are very much fast in providing. Yeah. So diesel plants are the one way I can say that it's fast responding to the loads. At the same time, startup time is much, much lower. Apart from, if the hydro is the fastest one, the moment you start leaving the water into the pipeline and then the turbine starts rotating. But, like gas turbines, also one of them, which is very fast. Engine plant comes next. Coal-fired will come later, because like nuclear plants take almost 24 hours to fire up and then start giving the power to the grid. So in that case, I think the ramping up rate of the diesel plant is, as we have in Kenya, the scenario, I think we are better placed. We can serve the nation much faster than anybody else. Okay. And we are also, you can say, reliable, dependable, because, it is not that we are depending on these weather vagaries, natural vagaries, that, unless there is wind, you can't produce power.
Yeah.
Unless, or in the night, solar cannot work, unless the BESS is implemented, and then there is a lot of storage going on, and then you generate in the morning and then keep it in the storage, which I think is still a very new technology coming up. So there is a lot of investment needs to be done. So as far as we are concerned, because we have diesel plant, I'm happy that I can say we are able to live up to the expectations of the nation and the demand.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. I'd like to go to Bryan Micheni. What operational gaps, I'm just following up on what Siva Shankar has just mentioned, for you to give us more insight, what operational gaps, ramping, inertia, reserve margins are already emerging in real-time dispatch, and what technologies, thermal, BESS, pumped hydro, demand response, best address these gaps?
Okay, thank you. So when you're looking at the real-time system, there's for example, when you look at frequency control, there's 3 different windows. The first one is a primary window, which is really, really short term. Basically, it's looking at what happens in the next 30 seconds after an event happens. The second one is the secondary window, which takes a fairly short period of time, about 5 minutes. And then the third one is the tertiary window, depending on how you're looking at it. In Kenya, we call, basically what we call the tertiary window is redispatch, where you're looking at how do I operate the power system the best possible way as possible, as is capable. Now, when you have, there's another attribute, if I may be allowed to throw one more term, is system non-synchronous permeation, SNSP. So this is a measure of how much wind and solar you have in your power system as compared to the legacy plants. So the higher your SNSP, the more wind and solar you have as compared to your overall generation. Systems with high SNSP tend to have a lot of intermittency. And because of what we have in Kenya, we have at times very, very high SNSP, sometimes 40%, 45%. So that means we need to regulate for about 40 to 45% of the generation that we have with our legacy generation. So there's a lot of burden on our hydros for short-term regulation. There's a lot of burden on the static compensators for reactive power, that is the reactors and capacitors. We keep on switching them on. They're really meant to be there for line energization. So a STATCOM is meant to take care of like your dynamic, what happens as real-time load changes. STATCOMs, SVGs, and static VAR compensators and all these different elements are supposed to take care of that. So that's a big issue. Number one is simply frequency control, and all forms of ancillary service have a big challenge in the current Kenyan power system. Number two is the reserve margin. Because we tend to have seasonality with high SNSP as well. When you're looking at the installed capacities, if your farm capacity is less than whatever you expect your demand to be, there are times that your variable generation might be zero. There are cases that we've had to face that over peak. And as has actually even been mentioned by the president a few days or weeks ago, there are times that load shedding because of generation shortfall has been necessitated in the past. And this is we're not talking about the 1997 rationing that we grew up in. We're talking about now a contemporary version of the same, where we have engaged. I know you have from your shift perspective. I have as well. We've engaged in a case where you've dispatched every single available generation in the country, and you still have a generation shortfall. And that's another thing that leads to import reliance for power. So there's quite a lot of different needs, but the two largest ones, need for ancillary service, and as well as ancillary service and regulating reserves, which is short term, and then also adequate reserve margin, basically to be able to meet peak even at zero VRE.
Okay, thank you so much, Bryan, for that depth and engagement over that question. As I conclude, Engineer Kihara, I know there's much to be said, but let us just conclude with this question before we open it up to the rest of the crowd for the questions and answers. What is EPRA's vision for a modernized ancillary service market, frequency control, spinning reserve, fast ramping, and how should remuneration be structured to attract flexible thermal investment?
Thank you, Ibin. There's a thing my colleague, and he was here in the morning, Dr. Mutua keep telling me, we need to move to electricity markets. So that where we have competition even in how electricity electrons are bought and sold. Currently, there are two things happening. One, there is an ancillary service study that's going on. At the same time, the Kenyan team, with the support of Danis, and remember that Denmark was the Nordic market, it's one of the oldest market. With their support, Kenyan team is also trying to design how is our market should be. This has gone a lot of iteration. And I was laughing because I saw another one. I know Bryan is in that. You are almost version 7. Keep changing, keep adopting, keep making better and better. But before you get to the market, when the EPRA has developed their regulations, they are currently undergoing their approval process. The ancillary services market now helps. As Bryan has said, we depend a lot on hydros for support. As we have more and more renewable energy. And Kenyan has been complaining that they are undertaking more and more maintenance on their system, their plants than they used to do. Now that you have more renewable energy. So how do we compensate that? And that's why this study now, this currently ongoing, the phase 2 of it, is actually now to understand what are these services and services that we require, how much of it do we require, and the most important part of it, how do we remunerate that? Of course, when you go to the market, and the market is designed such that you have the capacity market, the ahead market, and ancillary services market, that can be catered for in this market. But the current framework that we have, then we have to find a way of how we remunerate that. And that's the study that we are doing. We are hoping maybe by April next year, we should be able to get a report. And with that, maybe help us now see how do we now compensate for the services that are being offered by various power plants in the system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Engineer. Yeah, I know with Engineer Kihara, we don't really exhaust these matters. So this is an opportunity for the room to just, if you have any questions.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Karen Maina. I'm from Taswira. I have a question. I think it goes to Engineer. You've talked about leaning towards renewable energy more and the need for battery energy saving systems. My question comes in the disposal of these things once they have cleared their life cycle. Taswira is in the solar energy space, so we know that in 20 years, our solar systems need to be changed. However, disposing solar systems is a problem. So my question would be, is this a problem we are creating that in the next 20 years, the country has to figure out how to solve? And does that, when you balance the risk of going into solar and having all these batteries that then need to be disposed of at some point, in which we don't know how to do that yet, if I'm not wrong, when you balance that with keeping thermal energy, do you see the balance as worth it? That would be my question.
Yes, thank you, Moderator. My question goes to Norman. Norman, you have stated that you are looking at converting your plant into LNG. Now, the thing I would like to know is that how feasible is that? And secondly, are you going to suspend your PPA during the time of conversion because you are not going to be doing anything during that particular period? Thank you.
So my question is, I keep hearing a lot about this illusion of relying on imports, yeah? And I also hear a lot about the interconnectivity. As an industry, are we also looking at Kenya as being able to pay what other markets would be willing to pay given the constraints they have? And I'm thinking about with East African Power Pool, Tanzania connecting to Zambia, then to DRC, for people who are paying in excess of 40 cents. What makes us sure that that power that we are thinking will be there that is cheap given the tariffs that Kenya is looking at, as opposed to actually investing in sort of the thermal plants like you said? Are we having this illusion that those tariffs that we're talking about and the extra capacity is actually there, yet we might not be the most prospective customer because it's a market-driven sector? So just wanted to hear the thoughts that possibly continuing to invest in thermals in a global context could be something to be thought about. So I don't know what the thoughts are.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My name is James Bogwa from Triump Power. I'm happy to be here this afternoon, and I've listened to what Mr. Shankar and Norman have explained about the decommissioning of this power plant. And there is something that I'd like to back them more. If we consider that by 2035, we will have removed 500 megawatts from the grid, that is thermal, to save the environment, and we are targeting to have 100% clean energy. And at this stage, we are 90. The first question is, are we so that this dirty engine, which is controlled because our emission, which is the key thing that we are checking, has an allowable range? And we are able to manage nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, particulate matters, and all these thermal power plants are able to manage the allowable range. So, if we are decommissioning this, what happens, and this is what is happening currently, if a power plant trips or is removed, the normal investors and Kenyans and consumers opt for other small generators. And that is what is happening everywhere in these big towns, in Nairobi, anywhere. Many people have bought small generators. So the moment there is a blackout, they start those small generators. Most of them are not maintained well. So there is emission from small generators that are not known. So it's better to have the major power plant that have controlled emission, they are regulated, and they are known. If we are 90% green, we should not target 100% green at our expense, while there is nothing to do. The emission that is coming from the thermal power plant, we are still getting it from small generators that many people opt for. So when we decommissioned, for example, 𝐾𝐽2, the good engines from 𝐾𝐽2 that were declared old here, they went to Senegal and Mali. And the Senegal is about 25 or 30% clean. So the same engines that here were declared bad, they are running in Senegal. And in our case, we are 90% clean. So I think the stakeholders, we should consider this and see decommissioning this power plant. We are doing it at our own expense, and it will be very dangerous in the next 10 years to manage the 500 megawatts that we will lose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbogwa from Triump Power. That's quite a contribution to consider, Center.
I just wanted to add on what the other gentleman has said. Where I say there is a town, and something caught me when I was moving around when there was a blackout. Every small business has a generator, and if you and it caught me, and I went to research. Does KPLC or EPRA, while calculating the amount of emission we produce, account for captive power? How much captive power do we have in the country that is diesel? Will it be productive if we use the thermal power, which are well maintained and can be accounted in the system, and ensure continuous flow of electricity, rather than using small captive power that are not accounted where we count ourselves clean?
Thank you. My hand was up. Maybe you didn't see. My question is to the gentleman of thermal. Do you think that with this current shortage, there is room to bring in 1 or 2 thermal plants to alleviate that shortage? And my second is just a comment. I think this renewable, to me, I think we are taking it too far at the expense of our citizens. And I feel that even if you are 100% renewable and the economy is not growing, then there is nothing much we are doing. I want to give an example. Last year, I hosted Kenya-Uganda Oil and Gas Forum at Serena. And I don't think there was any government presentation. but there was a very serious presentation by the rank of the PS, assistant to the PS from Uganda. And you look at how serious they want to use their resources to drive those renewable, because the oil and everything that will come will help drive those climate change mitigations. So even as we can use the coal and all those items that we see, because being 100% renewable and the power is 22, 23 shillings, it doesn't help us so much. So there must be a balance of the two. And this is what really I want to suggest. Uganda, in their medium-term budget, if you have seen, there's a reduction in what do you call, in the importation of oil. There's a reduction in their MTP plan. You see, by 2030, their oil will reduce, pricing will reduce, the budgets will reduce, while ours will be nearly more than 20% more.
Thank you so much for that contribution. Very quickly, there was a third question that was asked on imports. I'd like Micheni to handle that. Then maybe briefly, Siva, Shankar, you can probably just add on to that last question that was given. Allow me to begin with Norman.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and respond to some of the questions that were asked by Fodamo.
Yeah, there was actually one that was specifically directed to you. That's what I wanted you to answer, the feasibility of conversion,
Okay.
the cost benefits. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Engineer Yogo asked whether we will suspend our PPA when doing that conversion, if we have to get to that point. And the question is no. The reason is most of the thermals have different units. You find that, for example, one power plant has maybe 8 or 6 to 10 units. It is possible to convert one unit while the rest are operational, meaning that the only one, or you only pull out like 10% of generation for conversion. Now, the storage again would have to change, but you don't replace. What you do is that you have parallel, storage for LNG, which again you install and use it. And what normally happens is that there is even a possibility that you can have a configuration that allows you to use the two fuels interchangeably. So these are possible technologies, and therefore you don't need to suspend the PPA. So that is what would happen in such a scenario. Just a short comment, if you allow me to, that just to reinforce what the gentleman there said, Engineer Yogo can attest to the fact that he offered 𝐾𝐽 2, about 72 megawatts, to KenGen almost free of charge to continue running that power plant. But the sector felt that was an investment at zero cost, only on take and pay to the government to alienate the kind of shortage that we have. And now today, we are talking about load shedding. I mean, sometimes we need to be serious in some of the decisions that we make. It's only last week that we saw Parliament recommending that those HFO plants that have, got to the end of the PPAs should be recommissioned through KenGen. But it is too late. The plant is in Senegal. He's in a different country as we speak. It's gone. So those are the kind of problems that we get into. And the general thing is here, I think sometimes it is better to have slightly higher expensive power than no power at all. I think all of us know what is the cost of having no power. Thank you.
Thank you so much. CEO, you've said quite hefty things. I think there's much to be considered, especially on that last point. Thank you for also addressing the question properly. Please, Bryan, quickly on the import question.
Okay. To state the question on input dependence and what exactly it means. So, first of all, when you consider the Eastern African power pool, the greater EAPP is going to be run as what is called a gross pool. No, as what is called a net pool. Basically, you put out your demand as a country, you put out what you can supply as a country, and then after you're done matching, you submit whatever is residual into the EAPP. So basically, it would be willing buyer, willing seller, conditional aspects to whether or not there's transmission. So it's not saying that I would dedicatedly buy power from a plant that's selling at 40 cents per kilowatt hour in DRC. It's literally stating that within the EAPP framework, we are in a position where, number one, we will buy power from whoever is selling power in the market and has excess. Our neighbors are currently investing in really expanding the capacity. For example, Ethiopia's installed capacity is around 5 gigawatts. And that's significantly higher than the peak. And most of the installed capacity is hydro. So you don't have as much seasonality as an issue. Tanzania is going through the same cycles where they're investing very heavily in hydro generation and as well as LNG. Uganda is investing very heavily in hydro. So when you're looking at this microcosm that is the East African community, the potential that we have specifically for cheaper power is quite large. Now, on top of that, we have transmission congestion, which is one of the reasons why we import, and number two, bilateral contracts, which is one of the reasons why we also import from Ethiopia. So yes, we are import dependent. It's not a rumor. It's actually true. We're heavily import dependent. Without import, I think would be load shedding 300 plus megawatts. So that just puts it in perspective. Basically, would be load shedding as a factor of the peak, about an eighth of the overall demand in the country. Now, if I may, I also want to draw one comment. When we're doing how national inventories for greenhouse gases are developed, also looks at things like fuel stocks. So at the beginning of every single year, this is the current volume of fuel that is anticipated to be stored in the country. This is the volume that I imported during the year, and this is the volume that was exported during the year, if it's exported to your neighbors. So you actually know how much fuel you've consumed. Unfortunately, I don't think the level of disaggregation of saying this has been used specifically for transportation and all those is at 100% level. But yes, basically the question of what happens with a person with a diesel generator in their house, that fuel is still accounted for in terms of our emissions profile. So that's the one comment I would do with that. So yeah, when we're talking about losing the 500 megawatts, it's part of what we look at in the least cost power development plan. We try for the adequacy of what happens if these plants are decommissioned. So of course there's different motivations around that, and you might need to have a few other factors around that. But yes, the moratorium definitely hurt us, which is one of the reasons why we're talking about load shedding. As we usually say, the power system has inertia. It gives you leeway. So from 2020, we haven't had any new power plants come in. So right now is one of suffering the consequences of seeing generation shortfalls starting to come. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Bryan. I know we've really run out of time. So Engineer Kihara, very briefly, to answer the question that was on the disposal of material for the renewables, and then I'll allow CEO Triump, Siva Shankar, to finish up on the last question that was asked, if that's okay. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I will answer a question from Karen Miner. Yes, disposal of batteries will be, of course, it's a risk that is there, not only battery, but also solar systems. The modules that you use what do you do after their lifetime? What we have done is, in the draft energy policy that has been developed by the Minister of Energy, is to see how we partner with the Minister of Environment. Remember, the issue of disposal is not entirely the work of Minister of Energy, it's Minister of Environment. But the policy is very keen on collaboration and partnership. So we are saying we partner with Minister of Environment to see how do we make sure the disposal of these products is done in the right way and doesn't harm the environment in a way. And also, Karen, remember, if we were to think that we are not able to dispose our battery, then we will not have our mobile phones today. So it's a risk that you take for development, but making sure that the effects are not really dire to our people, especially the future generation, because we are living today. The future is not ours; it's the future of our children, and we may have to make sure we give them a good future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Engineer Kihara. Please see you.
Yeah.
Triumph. Wow.
Okay, this is about, I think, some gentleman asked whether we have a chance of having another HFO plant.
Yes.
If I'm not wrong, that is the question. So I'm not advocating only HFO plant or any other plant. No, any thermal plant. There is opportunity now that the shortage is there, and going forward also you need a stable supply while you are transitioning. Engine plant is much easier to construct and quicker to construct rather than any other plant. So I think there is potential for if I say that diesel plant only, no, it's not right. There is potential for any kind of technology like geothermal also. It takes time to come online. But geothermal is one advantage that it is a thermal, at the same time it is renewable. So it is playing part of both. So, but only thing is, the way we have seen in Kenya, it is taking too long to realize any plants coming up quickly. As I was talking to somebody in MAN diesels sometime back, they are saying that their books are closed for 3 years. They can't supply one engine now because all the data centers are consuming a lot of power nowadays. 1,000 megawatt power plants are built only for the data centers. So that with that kind of demand, even if you want to go for a diesel plant today, you may have to wait for a few years to get the engine. So I think that way, probably I think we are a bit behind the schedule, and maybe we have taken too long to respond. And it has been said in the industry that we are going to face a critical situation, which was not really listened to.
Yes.
And now we are seeing the result. So that's my concluding remarks about diesel plant only. But we can have different kind of technologies which can come up quickly. At least they should come up in the next 1 or 2 years. Otherwise, we will be in a bad situation.
All right. Thank you so much. So in conclusion, we have seen the balancing act that comes with ensuring that we have energy that is stable, and thermal is not the enemy to renewables for certain.
Precisely.
Yes, we need to work together in collaboration, Engineer Kihara. Yeah, and ensure that we have dependable power and stability in our grid. And even as Kenya continues to lead in the adoption of renewable energy, there are plenty of opportunities before us for us to work together with the thermal investors to farm up on our power. And on that note, once again, thank you, the panelists. We've had quite an thought-invoking conversation and provoking as well. And let's keep the dialogue going on even as we walk around. And I'm sure there's plenty more to be discussed, but that will be all for us for this afternoon. Asante sana.